And welcome back into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. We finally have one of the biggest trades here at the MLB trade deadline to discuss. Isaac Paredes goes from the Tampa Bay Rays to a surprise team, the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs made a statement the other day bringing in a reliever, Nate Pearson. We thought maybe this is just them retooling their bullpen, seeing if they could make catch lightning in a bottle at the end of the year and just maybe catch a wild card spot. Nope. The Cubs see this as an opportunity to grow not just this year, but next year as well. So they go and push the pedal all the way down to the floor and bring in Paredes. Let us know in the comments section what you think about the surprise move by the Cubs. The losers in this race, of course, Seattle Mariners were heavily interested in bringing him in. The Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers, Pittsburgh Pirates were said to be in there as well. Pretty much any team in need of offense was looking into the idea of bringing in Isaac Paredes because he does have some versatility around the diamond. He can play third, he can play first, play a little bit of second. He can, of course, DH in. I'm sure if you had to, you could stick him in a corner outfield spot as well, but primarily he's a corner infielder, maybe a little bit of a second baseman as well. For the Chicago Cubs, this is a great move for them. They already have a sunk cost in Cody Bellinger. If they can get him to perform a little bit, or if they find a taker for somebody to take on that contract, maybe they go out there in the market again and add another piece. I don't see Bellinger moving, however. I think this is their big move here at the deadline. Let us know what you guys think in the comments of the Cubs acquiring Isaac Paredes. But first, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. Appreciate you guys joining us, and let's get into it. Alrighty, big headline, of course, Cubs getting Isaac Paredes. They end up giving 3 pieces back to the Tampa Bay Rays. An underperforming Christopher Morel, whose underlying numbers at least suggest that he's a kind of a Rays darling, if you will, that his numbers underneath the surface look a lot better than the actual end results so far this year. So they get him to headline the package. You also get Hunter Biggie, who's going to probably go into the bullpen right off the bat here for the Tampa Bay Rays, kind of fill that Adam role that they just traded to the San Diego Padres in exchange. And they also got a good prospect there in Ty Johnson. The trade for them, though, is going to hinge on Morel, in my opinion, as far as he's got 4 years of control, whereas Paredes had 3, including this year. And to see if what they can get out of Johnson. Now, Biggie could eventually turn into something really quality in that bullpen. They seem to really have a knack for turning most pitchers that they get into their system into at least serviceable MLB players. Sounds like Hunter Biggie could be a little bit better than that. But for the Rays, this is a clear sell mode for them right now. Ken Rosenthal just posted a story on The Athletic congratulating them on executing a perfect trade deadline as far as a seller. They didn't hem and haw and say, well, maybe if we just hit things right, maybe we can make a run. No, they decided early on that they were going to sell, and sell they have. Over the last 2 weeks, they've traded away about 6 pieces off of their Major League roster, bringing in a ton of young, controllable talent, which is what the Rays are all about. In that same article, he said that anybody making over $1 million left on that roster should be considering themselves on the move at this point. Pretty much anybody on that roster not nailed down, not tied to this organization for 4+ years, probably going to find their way on the way out the door. They do have a number of minor league prospects that could easily fill those roles right now. And if they catch lightning in a bottle, like the Cubs are hoping to, then maybe they could still hold on, possibly get a wild card out of it. Not saying they're winning the World Series or even winning the division, but that would be a great season, especially when you consider how many pieces they've already traded away, and they're only like 3-4 games out of the wild card. That's a very impressive season, even if they just missed the playoffs. Selling all these pieces right now is going to set them up so well in the future. You look at their top prospects right now, their top 5 are all very young. Their next 5 are also very young. This team is going to be quite formidable for a significant period of time. They are not investing in just one season. They're investing in a longevity here, a long-term plan of success to continue to stay in playoff contention. And every once in a while, when they have that special team, maybe they can make a run and win the World Series. That seems to be the model here for the Rays, and they're executing it to a T. Rosenthal and pretty much every other media consultant out there is saying that they're probably the best team as far as removing emotion from the equation. Hey, this player's been on my team, he produces, really like his character, his makeup, the way he sits in the clubhouse, all those kinds of things. And those can all be true. You might love the guy to death, but he might be more valuable as a trade chip for what he might bring you. And so the Rays are just ruthless in their ability to differentiate the two. Now, they have lost a few trades in the past. They tried, reclamation projects, high-end prospect talent that hadn't panned out anyway at other spots. They've done that a couple of times now in trades here at the deadline. One with the San Diego Padres getting 3 of the top 15, but one of those was a guy who's just getting back from Tommy John and has already issued 74 walks this season. I think his name was Lesko, the guy they got from the San Diego Padres. And then Morel, while his numbers look like they should be a little bit better, at least regress back to the positive here down the stretch here, he's still got 4 years of control left. And is he really going to have a home on the diamond? Rays are great as far as platooning guys, those kinds of things, but does he have a home in the infield for the Tampa Bay Rays? His best position's probably second base, but they may end up having to float him around. Rays are no stranger to doing things like that to make the best lineup work for them. So we shall see. Rays just picked up a catcher, Carson Kelly from the Tigers. Welcome in, Mark. Welcome in, JG. Rangers, they need a bat. I'll put it that way. Heim hasn't quite hit as well as he did last year. To be expected. We've seen him be hindered by strong workloads in the past. His first real taste of the big leagues with the Rangers in his first season, he really kind of slowed down in the second half of the year. Last year, he was the American League starter at catcher. Ultimately, in the second half, he did slow down a little bit and into the postseason as well. Then this year, he's hitting, 230 and change. He's really struggling as far as hitting that high fastball, and he has a hole in his swing right now. He's going to have to correct that, and I wonder if getting a catcher in here, which is what they did at last year's deadline, bringing another catcher in like Austin Hedges, Carson Keller could be the guy this year. I haven't seen the announcement yet, Mark, but we'll get into that in just a second. But makes sense. The Rangers do seem to like to carry 3 catchers down the stretch here to kind of lessen the workload on Jonah Heim. Catching 100-plus games is not very common anymore. You might be around that 100, 110 mark, but that's about the max for most catchers in the league these days. And for a bat as important into the lineup as Jonah Heim is for Texas, getting him off his feet for a day, putting him at DH might help them out. Knizner, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name anyway, the backup catcher for the Texas Rangers, is essentially the personal catcher right now for Max Scherzer, and he's been getting an extra start or two. He's still hitting around 200, so I wonder if that's kind of the philosophy here, is just getting another body in there to get him off his feet for another day during the week. One injury note that we were live during the game earlier today anyway, when John Gray went down, had a groin strain. Looks like he's probably headed for an injured list stretch here. He might have been one of the guys that they moved at the deadline as far as the roster crunch issues are concerned. When he comes back, I don't think he's being traded at this point. When he comes back, though, I would expect him in the long relief role out of the bullpen for the Rangers if all of their pieces are healthy the rest of the way. You look at their rotation right now, just their healthy bodies. You got Nathan Eovaldi as your 1, Max Scherzer as your 2, Andrew Heaney as your 3. Gray was your 4. And then Michael Lorenzen is your 5. Lorenzen really did a great job today saving that bullpen by his terrible outing yesterday, only getting through 2/3 of an inning as in his start against the Toronto Blue Jays, and then today pitching 4 innings, 1-run ball. Really did a nice solid for his team. And if the Rangers do indeed trade Michael Lorenzen, they owe him a tip of the cap for saving that bullpen a little bit. Looks like Tyler Mahle will be back in that rotation. I would almost expect it to be a 1-for-1. John Gray out, Tyler Mahle into that starting rotation. They have Dane Dunning, Jose Urena as well. As far as major leaguers who are already on the roster who could step in and spot start down the stretch, they're expected to get Cody Bradford, who they haven't stretched out as a starter yet. They're getting him around 2.5 innings right now in the minors. And right now, it seems like he's ticketed for a long relief role out of that bullpen. He looks dominant down in the minor leagues as well. JG, how are you? It's been a while. Trade deadline season. Who couldn't agree any more than that? I mean, this is trade deadline season. It's very exciting. Lots of movement happening, and we're only going to see more here. I think the market was really shocked by the team that got Isaac Paredes. I don't think the industry was shocked by, that the Rays were ultimately going to trade him. I thought this was really the best time for them to sell, bring up Caminero. It just seemed like a perfect time for them to do so. They still have one more piece as far as the infield is concerned that they will for sure move, in my estimation. That's Yandy Diaz. JG, hopefully the Astros land Yandy. They need a first baseman. The best one that's easily available is Yandy Diaz. Josh Bell is also on waivers. He's available. I think he'd be a decent consolation prize, but he's making a heck of a salary. Sounds like he might ultimately might end up getting through the deadline with the Marlins, because I don't think anybody's willing to take that salary on. So it might end up being a waiver claim after the deadline. So keep your eyes peeled there. And then as far as the other first baseman that might be on the market that we all were hoping would be on the market, Pete Alonso is on the wild card contending New York Mets. He's not going anywhere. The Toronto Blue Jays have Vlad Guerrero Jr. Seemed like all signs earlier this season pointed to them at least being willing to discuss it if they were in a losing situation around the deadline. Here we are. They're in a losing situation. They're selling off pieces. But now they're not willing to talk turkey, at least, on Vlad Guerrero Jr. I think that has a lot to do with the front office and their contracts that are up next season. If they don't have Vlad Guerrero Jr. on this team, how exactly can they sell themselves to ownership that they're going to be contending for a wild card spot, let alone the division or a World Series? And so that's my thoughts as far as why Vlad Guerrero Jr. is not on the market. If there were any other management structure in there, if they had just given them contract extensions already, I think we would have already seen Vlad Guerrero Jr. off the market, traded. He would have been the big first base domino to go, and then the rest of these first basemen would have followed thereafter. But as it stands right now, they're holding on to him. They still have a couple more rentals, low-level pieces on their roster to trade, maybe a starter or two. Chris Bassett has been floated as well from the Toronto Blue Jays. Mark, let's go up to your announcement there. Carson Kelly from the Tigers to the Rangers. I want to just refresh this page and just see if we're getting anything. Here we go. I'm curious to see what his numbers look like. Let's go ahead and flip over and just see what his numbers look like at the moment. Tigers. Colt Keith, by the way, looks really good. If you collect baseball cards, he might be a card you want to look into. He looks like he might be the real deal for the Detroit Tigers. Carson Kelly hitting .240 this year, .391 slug. That's a little bit better than consider their current backup. Played in 60 games. So this is, I think, like I mentioned off the top, This is about them getting Jonah Heim off his feet. JG, to your comment there, hopefully the Astros land Yandy. I think everybody in the market right now is just seeing what the return was for Isaac Paredes. They're seeing that the Cubs made the move for him and that the Dodgers didn't get him. They're looking big game right now. They're looking more at the starting pitcher market, though, with the likes of Scoble and Crochet and that type of pitcher. But you look at all the other teams that were in the market for Paredes. The most notable one that comes to mind for me is the Seattle Mariners. I thought maybe they could have double dipped there, bring in Randy Arozarena from the Rays, then double dip and bring in Isaac Paredes. They would at least improve their offense a little bit, but they need at least one more impact bat, maybe two. This lineup is really devoid of major league caliber talent. Replacement level talent, honestly, would be a step up from what they've had so far. They basically had 2 or 3 decent pieces, and other than that, they haven't had much to hang their hat on. That rotation has been carrying that team. The bullpens have been rocky in the first half. They are starting to round into form, though. That lineup is where the Mariners are looking to improve, and they missed an opportunity here with Isaac Paredes. Good on them for Randy Arozarena, who certainly turned his season around after making some adjustments to his swing early in the year. Ultimately, they didn't work. He went back to his pull-happy ways, and he's back to being the same old Randy Arozarena. I still think the Mariners, though, at least need one more impact bat in that lineup, even when they get J.P. Crawford and Julio Rodriguez back and healthy. Ty France, they designated for assignment. He's no longer on their Major League roster anyway, so we shall see what direction they go. Let us know in the comments section what you guys think the Mariners are going to do next. Where do you think the Cubs go from here? Are they done? Yankees are said to be looking at a couple of different deals right now. They're said to be in the market for at least a couple of different relievers, and they're said to be negotiating a deal that's close to getting done. Of course, that was 5 hours ago. That was tweeted out by John Heyman. No rumors have spilled as to what they might actually be looking at, but they at least have already made one significant addition. Jazz Chisholm is being brought in. His number 13. A little bit surprising that he's going to wear that one with the Yankees, but we shall see how his fit is with the Yankees and where he slots into that lineup. They just needed major league level talent, just like the Mariners need some type of a talent coming in there from an offensive perspective. I think Texas could use a jolt in the offensive direction anyway. They're going to get a ton of guys back from the injured list. Don't get me wrong. Max Scherzer coming back was a big boon for that rotation, who really got through the first half of the year. You know, when the rest of the league really thought that rotation was going to be the bugaboo for them, it was the lineup that was the issue for Texas. That rotation held up, but as the pieces were starting to come off the bus, that's when they got Max Scherzer back, and he really stabilized that rotation, at least for now. We saw how they struggled this weekend in that in the Toronto Blue Jays series. They're still going to get more pieces back. They're going to get Molly back probably here by his next start. They're probably going to get DeGrom around September. Bradford's going to be back here within the week or so. Dunning just came back as well. They should be all right in that rotation. I wonder if Josh Young is going to be enough of an offensive catalyst for this lineup, and Evan Carter. Josh Smith hit a home run today. He's been a really great piece for them this year. Kind of came out of nowhere. He was thought to be the defensive contact first guy that they got in that Joey Gallo trade years ago, and Ezekiel Duran was thought as the more impact-ready piece. Last year, Duran was the better player offensively. He got more playing time. This year, Duran is not the better player. He didn't get the playing time, and now he's back down in the minors to try to figure out his swing again. Josh Smith is the better offensive player this year. In fact, he's probably been the best offensive weapon the Rangers have had all year, but they still need somebody to give that lineup a little bit of a jolt. Adolis Garcia hasn't been himself so far this year. Hit the home run, had knocked in a few RBIs the other day. Not enough, though, to overcome the Toronto Blue Jays. I think they still need to add one more bat. Rumors were swirling about the Rangers being connected to Yandy Diaz, Brent Rooker, Isaac Paredes. Well, it sounds like Rooker's going to be held on to by the A's unless they're bowled over by an offer. I thought coming into the season they would look at guys like Pete Alonso and Vlad Guerrero Jr. to replace Nate Lowe. He's actually really stepped it up over the last couple of months anyway, and so he looks like he's stabilized that first base spot, but there still seems to be an opening for increased production. I would look for somebody more of a higher on-base percentage guy, somebody who can hit the fastball, maybe a switch hitter, right and left-handed hitter, who can handle both right and left-handers. So they did a great early season acquisition by bringing in Robbie Grossman. He's been their fourth best offensive weapon this year since he was acquired from the Chicago White Sox. They really shouldn't have let him go in free agency, but there is a spot on this roster for somebody to come in from another team and make a difference. Carson Kelly going to take one of those roster spots. I wonder if he's going to just take over the entire backup duties from Kisner, or if they're going to carry 3 catchers, which is what they've done in the past after the trade deadline. Let us know in the comments what you guys think the next step for the Rangers is going to be, but it does seem like they are going to buy here at the deadline. I know all of you guys out there that were, fans of the Yankees, fans of the Cardinals, Dodgers, etc., were all hoping that the Rangers would sell because they have some premium pieces that would be available. A lot of good pieces out of the bullpen, a lot of good pieces that you could put into your lineup, a lot of good starting pitchers coming back. They could have traded a bunch of that talent, really reset their farm system quite a bit. You think of what Tampa Bay has really done to reset their farm system. Texas could have done even more with the number of pieces that they could have traded. Ultimately, they are going to buy here at the deadline. I agree with you there, JG. Tuesday will be crazy. I think the market's a little bit gun-shy right now after the Paredes deal. They're just kind of recalibrating how a last-place Chicago Cubs team is making the big trade so far for Isaac Paredes. They're also looking at that return and going, how does this make sense? What does this mean for our rentals? What does this mean for a Brent Rooker? Jazz Chisholm has already been moved off the board. There's a number of pieces that are still in limbo, but we'll kind of get into those here momentarily. All right, let's refresh our page, see if we've gotten any notes on the return. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Will I be live Tuesday? Absolutely. We'll start early in the day. I know the deadline is, 5 o'clock? A little bit later than what it usually was when I was a kid. I think it usually ended around 3, but I think the deadline this year is around 5. And so we'll be live for most of the day on Tuesday, probably be around 9-ish when we go live. And then we'll probably be live all the way through the deadline, maybe an hour afterward, because we do get some deals that trickle in for about 30 minutes after. Maybe 45 minutes after we'll be live through. But we'll be live for about 9 hours and change on Tuesday. Tomorrow we'll be doing some lives as well. We'll probably do what we did today, which is split up a couple of different ones. We'll do an early, afternoon live around noon. Update you guys over lunch. Those of you who have to work, you guys can tune into us here at the Upside. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Paranormal, appreciate you for subscribing earlier. Thank you very much. But I got 20 of you guys with us right now. Thank you. Thank you for liking the video. Saw that one as well. But we will be live for you guys again multiple times throughout the week. And then we'll be posting some short videos out there to let you guys know what's going on. If you guys can't tune into our live, you can quick check out our 15-second video. Get the name, where pieces are going, what the impact is. Just short little blurbs if you can't tune into our live. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Randy, thank you for subscribing. Really appreciate that. But hopefully we get some more trades tonight. Usually the Sunday before the deadline, the weekend before the deadline is when you get some bigger trades made. And we still haven't really seen any big surprises as far as names that are being moved. Now, Paredes is probably the biggest piece as far as long-term commitment that has been moved so far. Tarek Skobal would certainly be a surprise move because he's not expected to be moved. But usually every year we see somebody who's in a tough contract situation with the team. Maybe he doesn't fit with the salary structure of that roster going forward. Maybe he doesn't fit in the clubhouse. Maybe they just want to offload the dollars and reinvest them in free agency. Usually we see a trade or two out of nowhere that surprises a lot of us. Up until, say, yesterday, we hadn't even heard Blake Snell's name being out there, but there are already 6 teams in on Blake Snell. Why is that? Well, he had a terrible start to the year, big-time contract. The Giants might want to offload that contract and just get out of that bad investment. Farhan Zaidi's in sell mode right now. Good on him for looking out for that organization rather than his own job, which I think is absolutely over here in a couple of weeks. But good on him for being a good man and just recognizing that they are not going to win the World Series. They're likely not to win a wild card spot either. And so moving on from Blake Snell, getting out from that contract would be the best thing for the Giants. And so 6 teams being in, they should be able to offload that salary, I would imagine, rather easily. Given his last 3 performances, he's been really dominant in his last 3 starts. He's characteristically had a really strong second half as well. So Blake Snell should be on the move somewhere. The Yankees, Seattle's been one of the teams that's been mentioned. St. Louis, the San Diego Padres, which I think is the best reason to trade for him. Or the reason being is if this former team looks at him and says, hey, we like what we're seeing, we want him back, that tells you all you need to know about where he is as a starting pitcher. Seems like he might be back, maybe not quite to that Cy Young level, but he certainly looked like it the last 3 weeks. Who do you think the Astros will get? Just what you've been hearing. I don't pay attention much, been busy. We've done a little bit of Astros coverage. We had, I think, Willard on earlier. He's another Astros fan, standing up for your Astros. I've mentioned multiple times over the last year how this is really the last run with the current group of players that the Astros have. The last run where they legitimately are considered World Series contenders. The reason why I say that, they have a number of guys who are going to be hitting free agency this year and next. They have one guy that's been signed a team-friendly deal, but outside of that, they don't really keep their own players or pay at the top of the market. Now, I'm not saying they're going to lose every single one of their own free agents. I am saying that they're probably going to lose 2, maybe 3 of those guys. And those free agents are guys like Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, Alex Bregman, Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker. They might be able to retain 2 or 3 of those pieces, but I'm not expecting Jim Crane, who's notorious for trying to penny pinch, to try to save that money. They could, of course, try to reinvest it and spend it, diversify that money a little bit, maybe make the team better as a whole, invest in first base, but they no longer have the prospects like they did when they let Carlos Correa walk, when they let George Springer walk, when they let Justin Verlander walk, when they let Garrett Cole walk. They let all these guys leave and ultimately were able to replace them with really good talent they already had in the minors. Diaz was probably the last piece they had in the minors as far as a catcher who was ready to come in. They have a number of starting pitchers that are older as far as pitchers in the system, and they might be able to move off 1 or 2 of those pieces to be able to get some long-term pieces that fit with the club right now. But their window to win a World Series is really this year, so I expect them to go all in here at the deadline. I thought Paredes would have been a great way to extend their title window. He would have filled in at first base this year and taken over for Bregman, let them save the money on Bregman next year. Ultimately, they don't get it done. I think the best fit for them right now is probably Vlad Guerrero Jr. or Yandy Diaz. So they need a first baseman. I would expect them to land one of them. If they end up with a Josh Bell, boy, that would be disappointing. I like Josh Bell as a player. I have since, 3, 4, 5 years ago when he was with Pittsburgh. But ultimately, he's just not the same player anymore. The game has moved past him and the position as a whole, the way he plays it. And Yandy Diaz, in a down year, is still better than John Singleton, is still better than Jose Abreu. They need improved production from that spot, and then they can worry about the offseason in the offseason. Astros may be in on Snell. I know they wanted him last year offseason. The only way they would be in there on Snell would be if the Giants were able to retain money. With as many as 6 teams in there for a Blake Snell, I don't think there's any way that they retain money on that deal, considering how many teams are interested in him. I think there's going to be a team out there that will bite down on that entire salary, and so in that case, the Astros, I think, are out of the picture on that one. I don't think Jim Crane's going to be willing to invest at that level. Now, of course, they have, as I mentioned, some free agency issues, and they might say, hey, well, this is just us protecting ourselves for next year. It could entirely be the case, but I just see other teams, 1, ponying up better prospects, and 2, being willing to take on the full boat of that contract, whereas Jim Crane might be a little bit more hesitant. Welcome in, Dennis. Welcome in, Ground and Pound. What the Tigers get, we don't know yet. His services, they're still waiting on the return. Still nothing yet anyway, but as soon as we find out, we will relay it along to you. Astros and Dodgers probably waiting until the last few hours. Dodgers actually do big things at the trade deadline. You think back to previous trade deadlines, Manny Machado, Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, Yu Darvish, bunch of other pieces they've acquired over the years. They really go all out at the deadline, and they're looking big game hunting. They're not looking for a back-end starter or a middle reliever. They're looking for stars here at the deadline. That's why, if they're looking for a position player, Isaac Paredes would have been a great fit for them. But they're looking more at the starting pitchers right now. They're looking at Garrett Crochet most notably. And if Tarek Skubal is moved, I expect them and the Baltimore Orioles to be right there on his market. I don't think they get that one done, though. Garrett Crochet, I think, is probably the best pitcher that's been mentioned, at least for now, that will be moved at the deadline outside of Blake Snell. After what Dana Brown said in the game of the Astros versus the Dodgers, giving vibes by saying they're holding on to their 2 minor league talents, so now Houston ain't trading this deadline. I mean, you look at what the talent that's going out there right now, It's a lot of quantity. It's not a whole lot of great quality. What I mean by that, it's not the top five of anybody's farm system right now. There might be some lower level prospects that had nice years. They're going to be on the mid-season prospect rankings in that 5 to 15 range. Those are the prospects we've seen move so far. We haven't seen anybody's top 100 guy really go yet, and those are the types of trades that Houston wouldn't be able to be in anyway. So for those of you who are Houston fans and you guys are looking for somebody that they could bring in, what kind of market could they be looking at? In the marketplace where they aren't giving up top 100 prospects, the Houston Astros can compete in that market with just about anybody. The only question is, are they willing to take down the money that they might have to in a contract? For instance, like Blake Snell, they'd have to eat all of that money if they were to acquire him, and that's where I think the issue would come in for Jim Crane. However, like I mentioned, they have the prospects, if they're still going quantity based, that they have some high performing prospects in the minors, lower level minors, that they can match some of these other offers that are out there right now. The only problem for the Astros is those are really the only good prospects they have at the moment. They don't really have much outside of that. So if they do spend all of their prospects right now and they go for an expiring contract, they really could be hitting the skids here over the next 3, 4, 5 years. They got to keep that in mind when they're looking long term with this team, whether they're going to spend in free agency, whether they're going to bring back their own guys, what the future is going to look like. But I do think this is the last real chance they have at a World Series. I do think they'll make an add. I do think they'll add at first base. But for right now, though, keep an eye on what the Houston Astros might end up doing. All right. Look, Astros ain't trading away. Denver. Is it the most expensive trade deadline in recent history? It seems like every year teams are just giving guys away to save money. It's actually kind of cheap for prices right now. Prices as far as trades right now are actually a little bit depressed, mainly because there aren't that many pieces on the market. You look at Isaac Paredes, I'm still surprised he went for as cheap as he did. Same thing for Randy Arozarena. You look at some of these relievers that were moved, a guy like Carlos Estevez probably had the best return as far as trade talent that was sent back the other way. Mid-season prospect of a number 5 and a number 7 from the Philly system. Before the season, though, those guys were outside of the top 20. That's probably the best return in a trade we've seen so far. Same thing for Jason Adam. He's probably second as far as the overall return in a trade. There haven't been that many significant trades as far as returns for sellers, which is a little bit surprising for me. Seems like they're going for more quantity over quality, which has worked for other teams in the past. You look at the Texas Rangers and what they did with Joey Gallo, turned him into 4 players, 3 of which have already made it to the major leagues. That's rare for major leaguers, or rare for trade assets, prospects anyway, to make it at that level of consistency. Glenn Otto immediately went into the Rangers rotation. Ultimately, he's no longer with the team. They still have Ezekiel Duran and still believe he's a future part of this team going forward. They also have Josh Smith, who's probably been their best offensive player, and then Trevor Hauver, another middle infielder who's, I think, at the AA or AAA level right now. He was, I want to say, was it Dansby Swanson's? No, not Dansby Swanson. He was somebody's teammate in college anyway. And he looked like he was going to have a really good bat. He hasn't really hit over the last year and a half, though. But 3 out of the 4 to hit the major leagues already, and it's only been a couple of years since that Joey Gallo trade. That's a great return on a expiring contract, and we're seeing teams do that same kind of thing this year by going more quantity, going for lower level prospects, younger prospects, and seeing if they can develop them in their own system, rather than trading away their guys that might be closer to the majors or guys that might be at the top end of their farm system. So as far as prices, right now, I would say they're still a little bit depressed. Astros choked runners on base today, no question. Well, they do need a first baseman. I mean, you're not going to win every single game. Rangers, I could say the same thing. They've struggled at times with their offense. They haven't really hit anywhere near the level anybody expected them to coming into the year. So that's why I think the Rangers are in the market for a bat. Hunter Harvey is already hurt for my Royals, looking like a bad trade already. Well, the Royals really, they surprised a lot of us this offseason by being the second biggest spender in free agency. We knew they would be better. I don't think anybody had them making it to the postseason this year. But right now, they're sitting in wild card spot right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they added another piece or 2 here at the deadline that wasn't extremely costly. Like I said, prices aren't exactly high. And there's so many relievers that are going to be traded here between now and Tuesday's deadline that the Royals could really go ahead and add 1 or 2 more relievers if they really wanted to. Maybe add a corner outfielder would be another bet that I would like to see them go for. They were in there for Jazz Chisholm to some degree. They're looking for some controllable talent as well. This is just the start of their window. They've really struggled to develop talent, especially on the pitching side for the last, 5 years now. They finally have Cole Ragans, who they got in that Aroldis Chapman deal. Some of the other arms are performing really well. Seth Lugo finally got a chance to start, and he looks really good. Made an All-Star team. He looked really good, since the All-Star break as well. But Royals are going to be a team I think is going to be right there all the way until probably the final 2 or 3 weeks of the season. The question is, are they going to be able to hold off the second and third place teams in the AL East or the second and third place teams in the AL West? Remains to be seen. Let's just update our board here just to see if we've gotten a return yet. Tigers are getting catching prospect Liam Hicks and right-handed pitching prospect Tyler Owens in exchange. I was wondering what those names were that you were mentioning, JG. Let's see if we can pull up what the prospect status was for the Rangers. Hicks. Not in their top 30 unless they've already updated this. And what was the other one? Tyler Owens. Another guy outside of the top 30 anyway, going into the year, at least according to MLB.com. Let me flip over to the Tigers just to make sure they didn't already put him in there. No, they did not. Okay. Let's see if we can see what their numbers are so far. Liam Hicks, 25-year-old catcher. Double-A catcher hitting 260. 353 batting average. Similar numbers, I suppose, to what Carson Kelly is, but of course at the Double-A level. And then the other one, Tyler Owens, 23-year-old. Double-A, a 2.8 ERA, relief pitcher, 1.18 whip, strikeout rate around 9. So a decent reliever at the Double-A level if he continues to progress. He might be a real player out of this trade. Not a bad get for Carson Kelly. Just, I don't think our farm system can compete for trade offers. We'll see. Any updates on the White Sox pieces? Well, the industry, at least when I say industry, the media out there believes that the other front offices don't like the prices they're hearing from the White Sox front office. This was the same problem they had at last year's deadline, but the White Sox still have a number of pieces they could move. I find it hard to believe that they're going to hold on to Luis Robert one more season, especially when you consider his injury issues. Same thing for Garrett Crochet. This is the real first time he's pitched this many innings in his career. I would imagine they get a long-term extension done with whichever team they want to trade him to. I would expect either the Orioles or Dodgers to ultimately get him. So I'm calling hooey on that one. As far as the White Sox go, though, they're going to trade Michael Kopech. He's kind of the sneaky name I'm looking at here at the deadline that might make a real difference. You think back to a few off seasons ago, everybody was clamoring for Josh Hader year after year at the deadline. They viewed him as a multi-inning reliever when that was really in vogue. You remember the years that Chris Davinsky for the Astros was really dominant. Andrew Miller. You think of Aroldis Chapman was being asked to close multiple innings for the Cubs at times after he was traded from the New York Yankees. The kind of the elite multi-inning relievers that were able to bridge the 7th to 9th innings to get it to the closer. That's kind of how I see a guy like Michael Kopech figuring into the postseason picture this year. A starting pitcher might get you through 5-6 in a good postseason start. Very rarely do you see a starter go 7 or 8 innings in a postseason game. Michael Kopech could be the perfect bridge between that 7th to 9th inning, taking over those 7th and 8th innings. He is that good. That stuff is that electric back there in that bullpen. A team that gets him, I think, is going to have a real weapon going forward. So keep your eyes peeled for where Michael Kopech may ultimately end up. The Dodgers and Yankees, because the biggest markets, the way, no doubt, strike calls. Okay, Willard. Every team believes they're umpired every now and again. They get jobbed by the umpires every now and again. I mean, I was watching the beginning of the Diamondbacks game, and Christian Walker, the first baseman for the Diamondbacks, was unhappy with a strike call from the first base umpire on a check swing. Took about 35 seconds, way longer than normal, to get back into the box. Well, apparently you're able to step out as long as you want to. Or at least that's how the broadcast made it seem. And so the pitcher got back onto the rubber and was like, all right, let's go, and then stepped off. They didn't actually count that as a pitch clock violation or a hitter violation for getting back into the box. They actually counted as a disengagement by the pitcher. So, I mean, you saw arguments on both sides, but every single game, everybody believes they're jobbed a little bit by the umpires. I don't buy it. Every game there's going to be rough calls. Angel Hernandez had some of the worst this season against Wyatt Langford. We saw those pitches were 6 inches minimum outside, and they still called them strikes. He's no longer part of the umpire crew. But there are some umpires out there that have been worse than what that was for Angel Hernandez this year. C.B. Buckner's been one over the years. Laz Diaz has had his good moments and bad. We saw him have some bad moments in the Mariners game the other day. But every team believes they're getting jobbed by the umpires. Just tone it down a little bit. They have a hard job, but that's why I'm a proponent of the automated ball strike system, not the challenge system. I get that they, still want to have the human element to the game, be able to have the other team, challenge it and say, was it in or was it in the strike zone or was it out like tennis? I don't like that either. I want the umpires focusing strictly on what's happening on the field in front of them as far as did the guy actually go around. Then you'd be able to see better swinging strike calls, or did he hold off on a check swing calls a lot better than you do right now, because the home plate umpire can focus on that kind of thing. Balks would be called incredibly more frequently because they would be focusing on the pitcher far more as well than just the ball strike call there that they have primarily been responsible for years. And so this, I think, would be a natural progression for them. Do I think they'll do it? Absolutely not. But I think it'd be a great thing to help solve some of the issues, some of the chaotic nature, the argument that you get on the field, those kinds of issues. They'd also be able to arbitrate whether or not somebody was intentionally throwing at somebody's head, or were they just, throwing it, lost the grip on it, or whatever the case may be, and be able to handle those situations far more quickly and adjudicate them properly, rather than just guessing and saying, well, what did you see? What did you see? I don't know. I didn't really see nothing. Well, let's just throw our hands in the air, give warnings, and the next guy who throws one, we'll toss them and the manager. That's not how things should be done. This is Major League Baseball. They need to be a lot more clear on those types of issues. But here we are. It's trade deadline day, or trade deadline weekend right now. We got the trade deadline in a couple of days. Isaac Paredes, the big move so far. Rangers have announced their buyer, bringing in Carson Kelly, adding some good talent there at the catcher spot. I think they'll carry 3 catchers going into the second half of the year here after the deadline, like they seem to do every single year, to take some of the workload off of Jonah Heim. Adam, welcome in. Appreciate you for joining us. Galatian, same thing. Appreciate you for joining us as well. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We're going to be live for you guys multiple times a day between now and through the deadline. So make sure you guys subscribe, join us, follow us over on X at UpsideSN. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. Could you see the Dodgers getting Rooker from the A's? Well, we mentioned in an earlier live that Rooker seems to be pulled away from the market a little bit from the A's. They seem to be happy with the way their offense is progressing, and Rooker is a big piece of that. The strikeout rate is very concerning, but they view him as a critical piece of their future, and so they're not willing to necessarily just sell him here at the deadline. They're a little bit worried as far as if they take him away from this team, then are they continuing the bad cycles they've continued, or that they've had going for years now? Butler's been a nice addition for them. He's really found a nice stride recently, but Rooker, I think, would catch a fair price on the market. You look at what Paredes got, I would expect something very similar for Brent Rooker. I think the A's would be wise to trade him because they really don't have many starting pitchers that they've been able to get anywhere over the last year or two. They haven't been able to develop them, and that's part of the reason why they're where they're at right now. The trades that they've made for these big time prospects ultimately haven't worked out the way they usually do for the A's. Galician, when do you see what do you see the Cardinals doing? Well, they just designated Giovanni Gallegos for assignment. I'd expect him to essentially end up on a team like the Rockies, who could rehab his career a little bit, maybe make him a true reliever ace, if you will, maybe get him back to a closer. But as far as the rest of it goes, they're a team that's kind of listless right now, as one of our subscribers put it in an earlier live. They just need somebody to come in there and give them some stability, and then I think they'll still be right there with the Brewers all the way to the end. Welcome back, Hank. Appreciate you for joining us once again. Not excited about Kelly. We need relievers. To me, this is the equivalent of Austin Hedges, but with a better offensive upside than Hedges last year. Hedges was a defense-only type of catcher. Kisner, I think, is that equivalent this year, already on the roster, so getting a little bit better offense from Kelly is a nice boon for them. So that's what I see them getting here in Carson Kelly. They do need maybe one reliever. They've gotten some nice performances lately out of Jose Leclerc. David Robinson's been great all year. They've gotten Kirby Yates to really find the fountain of youth, and he looks as good as he's ever looked anyway at the major league level. All-star this year, he looked fantastic. I'm curious to see what they ultimately get out of Josh Sborz, if they can keep him healthy. Jonathan Hernandez has had his good moments and bad. Today, of course, kind of thrust into that starter's role because of the injury to John Gray. End up giving up, I believe, 3, maybe 4 runs today. But overall, he's been up and down. Can't really count on him to be one of your number 1 aces out of that bullpen. Jacob Latz had a good start to the year. The first 3 months were really good. He's really struggled in his last 10 appearances, though. About what you'd expect for a guy who's really getting his first consistent taste of the major leagues. But I would agree they do need to add one more reliever back there. My hope before the season was a guy like David Bednar. I don't think you necessarily need a closer now. I think Kirby Yates has got that one pretty much locked down, and then you have Robertson there as well, should he falter or get injured. A guy that I mentioned just a few moments ago, I think would be a great fit in that Rangers bullpen is Michael Kopech. They're going to get a number of starting pitchers back here over the course over the next month or so, and those guys are going to fill in the bullpen as well. Jose Urania, the Dane Dunnings of the world, the John Grays of the world, probably all going to end up in the bullpen along with Cody Bradford. I think Michael Kopech probably be the only one that might fit into this bullpen down the stretch. Who's the best target for us then? Eric Fetty? For the Cardinals, I think your best fit... Okay, we'll do this in 2 parts. One, who would make the biggest impact for them? Possibly bringing back a Jack Flaherty might make some sense, but I would estimate that Eric Fetty is probably the most likely and reasonable target for them to try to acquire. I doubt they'll make a move for a guy like Garrett Crochet. I don't think they'll make that kind of investment financially. They're really looking for consistency at the top end of that rotation, and so I wonder if they go back to the fountain or back to the Cardinals well here and bring back Jack Flaherty. Maybe they go with a Michael Lorenzen type from the Texas Rangers, but that's more of a back-end starter type player for them. To me, they need a guy who's going to start a playoff game for them. Eric Fetty is a kind of a borderline case for that. His numbers this year suggest he might have turned the corner to where he could be a number 2 or 3 starter for the Cardinals, but he's probably the most realistic target for those Cardinals to be able to get. John, any interest on Diaz from the Rangers? Yandy Diaz, they are definitely in there for Yandy Diaz. I expect them to be looking for a bat just like him. Brent Rooker as well. Paredes before he got traded. There's a couple of other guys that I would keep tabs on, but Diaz probably the most likely of all those guys for the Rangers to try to acquire. And the Rangers are already getting the ball rolling, getting a deal here for a catcher in Carson Kelly. They're still going to get Josh Young back. They're still going to get Evan Carter back, probably in a few weeks anyway. They have a roster spot they could easily free up by sending Travis Jankowski to the injured list, much like they did with Brad Miller last year, and then really just keeping him on the roster as a clubhouse guy. He seems to really fit into there. Are the Cubs buyers now? Sean, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. Got 35 of you guys with us right now. Appreciate it. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to be live multiple times over the next few days, keeping you guys updated on all the latest from the MLB trade deadline. So make sure you hit that subscribe and join us here at the Upside. Follow us on X at UpsideSN as well. We'll post when we go live there as well. If you guys are at work or something and want to know when we're live, we'll post it there if you don't get notifications from YouTube. But Sean, Are the Cubs buyers now? I would say no. They're more of an opportunistic team right now. They made the acquisition of Nate Pearson. To me, that wasn't really a buy move for them. That was more about them just filling a hole on a team that needed some bullpen help already. I think even if they were a seller, they are a team that was just looking to tread water all the way to the deadline and maybe catch lightning in a bottle, Nate Pearson would fit that kind of a mold, and it didn't really cost him a whole lot to get that move done. The Isaac Paredes move seems like a buy move, right? Well, this is a buy move not just for this year, but for the next couple of years as well. Really gives them a number one option at that third base spot. They've had kind of a rotating door over there for the last couple of years. Different guys playing in there every other day. But I don't think they're going to be sellers. I think they're going to hold on to guys like Horner and Happ. They might trade some salary off of this roster a little bit. A guy like Jameson Taillon might find a new home. Seems like there's some teams touching base here, like the New York Mets have reached out ever since the injury to Kodai Senga. The Yankees have reached out about Jameson Taillon as well. So there is a reason to believe that the Cubs could do a little bit of what I believe the Rangers are going to do here and buy and sell here at the deadline. Rangers have a number of starters that are going to be on that roster at some point. They have to offload some of them. I think the Cubs are in a very similar spot where they might want to save money on a guy like Jameson Taillon or a Cody Bellinger. I don't think they'll find a taker for Bellinger, but I think they could find a taker for Taillon. As far as the question, though, are they a buyer? This is more of a buy move for them for this year, next year, and the year after. If this was a pure rental, then I would consider this a buy move for them. But this is more of a baseball trade for them. It was basically moving a major league player in Christopher Morel in exchange for Isaac Paredes, along with a couple of minor leaguers going back the other way to the Rays. But this is about improving their team overall, and they got a great bat, probably the best bat available, and he's controllable for a couple years thereafter. Really like the move for the Cubs, and I really like how their deadline is shaped up for them. They're 6 out of the wild card. I would not say that any team above them is out of reach as far as the wild card spot. Even the division I don't think is completely out of hand. But let's look at that standings real quick just to make sure I'm not losing track here. They're 10 back. We've seen teams overcome 10-game deficits in a month. We got 2 months until the end of the season here, and none of these teams in the NL Central are behemoths. You look at the Pirates; they're starting pitching base. They need to add some offensive talent. The Cardinals, up and down season this year, they're kind of listless unless they add a starting pitcher and maybe get their head on right. You don't really look at them and go, "Oh my gosh, they're the old St. Louis Cardinals. They're going to win the division like they do every year." The Brewers are very young. They've added a bunch of talent as far as to the pitching side, but I don't think any of it really scares you. For the Cincinnati Reds, they're tied with them in the basement of that division. They're a very young team. They're probably going to sell off some of their bullpen pieces right now, and I think they're in a different spot this year than they were last. Last year, I was a little disappointed the Reds weren't able to hold on and make a run of it, but the Cubs seem to like their position right now, 5 games back in that wild card, and we shall see what happens. Why would the Cubs trade Taillon? He is under contract because he's under contract. That's why. You look at what the Toronto Blue Jays are likely to do with Chris Bassett here at the deadline. They might want to get the prospects from Chris Bassett, be able to sign a pitcher in the offseason of very similar talent level, and still be able to reap the reward of trading him now. For trading Jameson Taillon, they already have some pitchers that could play for them at the major league level on the roster and in the upper levels of the minors. They could, of course, go out there and add a pitcher here or there on the waiver wire after the deadline as well. But for the Cubs, it'd be about getting off of the money for Jameson Taillon while it's good right now. I think you're not going to find a better opportunity to move him. I think after the season, if he has a poor second half, you're stuck with that money once again. But right now, his trade value is raised enough to where you might be able to get off of the entirety of that deal. And that would probably be the best case scenario for the Cubs ownership group, who doesn't like to spend lots of money anyway. They're already looking to offload the contract to Bellinger if they could. I think they would. I don't think they will be able to, though. But Taillon is a much easier piece to move because of the dearth of starting pitching on the market, his rebound in performance to some degree. And I believe they could get very similar talent already on the roster to take his spot in that rotation as well. So that's kind of where I see the Cubs at. But hopefully we get to see some more trades tonight. Let's go ahead and go back over to MLBTradeRumors.com and just see if anything else is happening at the moment. Doesn't look like it. Looks like the first real trade anyway since that Paredes deal was the Rangers one. We're going to go ahead and scroll through this list and just see who's already been traded off of this 50-man list that the trade rumors put together. Jack Flaherty, number 1, still available. Top rental option probably on the market. Garrett Crochet, of course, his trade chatters died down a little bit because of the comments he made about wanting a contract extension. I don't think that's really affected the two most serious contenders for him in the Orioles and Dodgers. I think both of those teams would want to sign him anyway. Orioles are limited financially compared to the Dodgers. Even though the Dodgers, I believe, would love to have his salary on the books this year, save the tax money. But the Dodgers are the Dodgers. They don't really care about sunk costs as far as money. They want to win. They're trying to overcome the Phillies in the NL side and win the World Series. They've spent all this money this offseason to try to win a World Series this year. They're heavily invested already. So what's one more big-time salary in Garrett Crochet? Meanwhile, the Baltimore Orioles have an expiring deal with Corbin Burnes. Remains to be seen whether or not he goes back there in the offseason. They need a number 1 if he decides to go elsewhere. Crochet could be that guy. The question is, what kind of money would he require to sign there? If he doesn't sign an extension, he says he probably won't pitch in the postseason. I don't necessarily believe that. I think he would pitch in the postseason if push came to shove. But he's right to go ahead and try to stand up for his best leveraged position, which is right now, and try to get a deal done with whichever team wants to trade for him. Could the Cubs signings in the offseason, and the Cubs want Blake Snell? I think there's 6 teams in the market. I think we've talked about Blake Snell already. 6 teams in on Blake Snell. I think if they move Tyone, if they wanted to replace him with Blake Snell, I'm not sure that is a big enough of a difference for them to take on the money of it. I think there are other teams that would outbid them anyway. Galician, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but I don't think the Cardinals make any moves till tomorrow or Tuesday, plus the manager said the front office is limited in what they can do in terms of adding salary, so I'm not convinced they do a decent trade. I would agree there. I think financially they're a little bit hamstrung, but there's only, a third left, maybe 40% of a salary left on these deals. You look at a Michael Lorenzen, for instance, of the Texas Rangers, only signed, $5 million, something like that? I think it was $3 million. He's got, 1.3, 1.4 left on that deal. That would easily fit into the budget for that team, but that's not really a trade that's going to make them a postseason contender. I do think it gives them some stability in that rotation, though, if they're unable to get another starter in there. I think they need to bring in a starter who's a cost-controlled guy, like Eric Fetty, $7.5 million next year. I think that would be a perfect trade candidate for them. Does it push them over the top of teams like the Phillies or Dodgers or Braves or Mets? No, but it does solidify themselves at the top of this division, right there all the way to the end with the Milwaukee Brewers. But they've been a team that's kind of had their ups and downs, peaks and valleys, and they just seem a little rudderless this season. And I think bringing in a starter like Fetty could stabilize this team to where they find a stride in mid-August and then roll to a division crown in September. We've seen the Cardinals do that before. Estevez already moved to the Phillies. Tanner Scott, best closer left on the market. Dodgers are looking for some big names. Tanner Scott's probably the biggest name closer that's available right now. I'm not sure they do that, even though Phillips has had his ups and downs recently. But they're a team to watch. The Yankees are in the market for him. The Orioles, I think, would be a great fit for Tanner Scott. In fact, I think they're probably the most likely to get him. They still have the prospect wherewithal to get him as well. So Tanner Scott, my prediction, probably going to end up with the Orioles. I think their best fit for him fitting into their bullpen right now as their eighth inning guy and taking over for Kimbrel if he continues to falter like he has so far. Chisholm already gone to the Yankees. Fetty, we've talked quite a bit about him. Rays have already traded Eflin. They still have Zach Littell that they could trade away. He's ate quite a few innings already. He might be a nice trade acquisition for the Cardinals. Cardinals and Rays have come together on multiple trades, especially for starting pitching, over the last 5, 6, 7 years. This could be the latest in that long line of trades. Jansen's already been traded. Kikuchi from the Blue Jays sounds like he's going to be moved. The Orioles are said to be in the mix there. I think he'd be a great 4 or 5 option for them, especially considering the number of starters that they have injured and are not expected to get back before the end of the season. I think the Braves would be a nice fit for Kikuchi as well. They don't really have any depth as far as starters, and they just lost Ronaldo Lopez for at least a couple of weeks, it sounds like, so he might be on his way out the door to one of those two places. Trevor Richards, another piece that could go from the Blue Jays. Jack Suwinski sent to AAA. That's interesting. Orioles really haven't given up any of their top 15 prospects. Absolutely. That's why they're at the top of the market for a lot of these names that are out there. Until they really give up the upper levels of that minor system or that top-end talent out of there, they're going to be front and center for every single big name that's on the market. and rightfully so. They need to add some starting pitching, though, and the deadline this year, the only guy that really moves the needle in the way I think they need to do it is a guy like Garrett Crochet, is a guy like Tarek Skobal. Somebody of that ilk is what they really need in that rotation. Skobal, I don't think, is going to be moved unless they're just bowled over by an offer. Jackson Holliday certainly would be a great centerpiece of a deal. I don't think he would be involved in any deal, though. But remains to be seen what happens here at the deadline for Skobal. My guess is he's still on the Tigers come August and September. Continuing down this list, Luis Robert, just like we mentioned with Garrett Crochet, the market seems to have dried up a little bit on him, or at least their teams are a little bit more leery of the cost of him. But the White Sox have to realize what they have in front of them. He's healthy, he's been good this year, and he needs to be moved if they're ever going to move him. Now is the time. Getting him into the offseason, another injury could happen, regression in what he's able to do on the field. All those things come back into play, which are all very realistic options for him as well. There's no guarantee he finishes the season healthy, even more so than some of the other players out there. He is, not to say injury prone, but he's been injured more than most. And I would move him absolutely if I'm the White Sox. Cubs need a full-time first baseman. Wasn't that what Bellinger was supposed to be? Brent Rooker, we just talked quite a bit about him, about the A's pulling him back a little bit from the market. Hunter Harvey has already moved from the Nationals. They still have Kyle Finnegan. If you miss on Tanner Scott, maybe a team like the Pirates could turn towards Kyle Finnegan. Maybe the Royals double dip here and go back and get Kyle Finnegan from the Nationals there. Michael Kopech, love this guy as far as a talent in the bullpen. I think he's an absolute weapon. Ever since he's been back there, he has been nothing short of dominant. Don't look at the overall numbers. Look at what he's been doing over the last month or two since he's been pushed back into that bullpen. He looks nasty. His stuff is played up significantly. And like I mentioned earlier, the Josh Haders, the Andrew Millers, those type of super relievers, Chris Stavinsky's of the world, those guys who were able to get teams to the World Series and win World Series because of those long relievers. I think Michael Kopech could be a non-starter and a non-closer who makes a significant difference here at the deadline. You look at what the Rays got for Jason Adam. I think you could look for a very similar package here, maybe a little bit less for Michael Kopech, just because he has done it for a shorter period of time than Adam has. But I think the impact could be even greater. Pete Fairbanks could be another piece that's making millions on that Rays roster. Mentioned off the top that anybody who's not nailed down right now, low-cost contract for 4+ years, those types of things, those guys are all expected to be at least on the table, possibly being traded. But as far as Fairbanks, you're looking at Springs, you're looking at Lowe, who could be moved, Diaz. Those are the names I'm looking at from the Rays that they could trade here at the deadline, in addition to Zach Littell. Mattis, first base for Detroit, has some speed. Okay. Harvey got injured. That's what we were mentioning earlier. 18, Winker has already gone to the Mets. 19, Brebbia has closed a few games recently for the White Sox, but he's been hit hard as well. I'm not sure he really moves the needle for a team that's trying to make a acquisition for a 7th, 8th, 9th inning guy. To me, he screams more of middle relief. And if you're looking for that at this point, you're mainly just saying he's an injury fill-in for now. I don't think he really moves the needle, though, as far as an impact piece in a bullpen in a postseason series. He was good for a couple of months there, but he's really gone back to the mean over the last week or so. Arozarena already gone on to the Mariners. Lane Thomas of the Nationals, one of the last pieces they have to trade here. Could be a nice bench piece or a outfielder for the Atlanta Braves. There seem to be some serious ties between the two. Tommy Pham, his name has been mentioned pretty much since the beginning of the offseason, that he'd be a great postseason bat for somebody to sign. Ultimately, the White Sox were the only one willing to pony up some money, and they brought him in because they knew they'd be able to trade him for something at the deadline. The question is, what something will they be able to get? He's still a good performer this year. I think he's actually hitting a little bit better than what he did last year, but I think he's got a significant impact wherever he goes as a clubhouse guy, those types of things. I think he's a good fit wherever he goes. Kevin Pillar, another guy who's having a good year for the Angels in his final year. Just like Kevin Kiermaier, I think could be moved from the Toronto Blue Jays. These guys that are center fielders, corner outfielders that are having good offensive years, I would expect to be moved. Kevin Pillar, I think, should fetch a decent prospect package. Maybe a borderline top 20 guy, maybe an extra piece as well. But he could make an impact for somebody here at the deadline. I think Braves would be a great fit, even better than Lane Thomas, honestly. The next two catchers, I believe, off the market from the Rockies, Elias Diaz and Jacob Stallings, both expiring deals. Diaz, I think, could make an instant impact wherever he goes. I think he'd be able to be a great platoon catcher. Maybe not a starter and then a backup. I think it'd be more of a 1A, 1B with Diaz coming into wherever he ends up going. Stallings, I think, is more of a clear-cut B on a roster. Gives you a good option back there. Good receiver, good defender, those types of things. Rockies, couple of pitchers that you could possibly put at the back end of a rotation. Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber. Unless you're willing to pay a decent prospect package, I think the Rockies ultimately hold on to both of these guys. They never really seem to move arms like this. And both guys have performed relatively well there with the Rockies. A hard thing to do in Colorado. Trevor Rogers has had a nice season with the Marlins. Not necessarily great, but a decent year, especially when you consider all the other starters on their rotation that are having poor seasons or injured this year. But this was the deadline plan for the Marlins, is if they were bad, they were going to trade some starters. They were hoping to have better performances and better starters to trade and really recoup, really significant value here at the deadline. Ultimately, they don't have those arms and don't have that performance track record to show. Their best piece, probably their closer, Tanner Scott. Trevor Rogers, probably their best piece out of that rotation that's going to be moved here at the deadline. Maybe Jesus Luzardo, but he's around a 5 ERA. Not going to bring you a whole lot. Brendan Rodgers, I don't think they move him for the Rockies, but he's on there. Adams from the Athletics. I guess if you're looking for more of the depth piece, but Mason Miller's really the big get there. If you can get him healthy before the postseason. Punched a table after a game last Monday and busted up his hand on his non-throwing arm. And so he's probably not going to be back until mid-September, somewhere around there. And but he has some of the best swing and miss stuff out there. The question will be, do the A's try to capitalize on that talent now and get some significant pieces back, starting pitcher talent, that type of thing? Or do they keep him, trade him after the season, or keep him entirely? They also have Ursig, their 8th inning guy. He looks really good, 29 years old. Doesn't really fit the timeline of the A's. I think he is likely to be moved as well. Welcome in, Chris. How about Oakland and Angels closers moving forward? Oakland, I think if they move Mason Miller, Ursig goes back there. If they move Ursig, I think Miller stays there as the closer there. For the Angels, they could use any number of their relievers that they have back there. Hunter Strickland, some Garcia's back there. They have Matt Moore. They have, there's 4. Hunter Strickland is another one that I was thinking of. He might be their closer after Estevez is gone. Not necessarily a great option, but hey, that's why you're a seller. You trade the pieces that are good, and you hope to get value for the other pieces that you have left in the off-season. Alrighty. Andrew Chafin of the Tigers might be a nice bullpen piece. Luis Garcia, we just mentioned him. I expect him to be dealt here at the deadline. I think he'd be a great setup guy. Sinker ball. I think the teams that really utilize that type of pitcher really would be a nice fit for him. Texas would be a great fit. I'm not sure they need another one-inning reliever, though. I think he'd be best fit on a team that needs a one-inning reliever. You look at the way the Phillies have built out their bullpen. They traded away Sir Anthony Dominguez and brought in Carlos Estevez already from the Angels. Estevez, I think, pencils in as the 8th inning guy right now. I think Garcia would be a great 7th inning guy for them. They also have a couple of good relievers that were middle relievers coming into the year, and Strom that were all-stars at the break. I think they should bring in at least one more arm to solidify that bullpen as far as I'm concerned. Willard, I'm telling you, if I'm Houston, I'm trading Tucker for Spencer Jones or trying to rebuild since they're probably not re-signing him. Oof. That would be, if I'm the Astros, just kind of, we've talked a little bit about the Astros a few times now, how they have 5 or 6 guys that are going to be hitting free agency either this year or next that are significant pieces. If they're going to hold on to 3 of them, Yordan Alvarez is piece number 1 that I keep. Number 2 is Kyle Tucker, and it's very close between the 2, and then Framber Valdez. Outside of that, I'm willing to let go of Alex Bregman. I'm willing to let Verlander go into retirement and try to spend the money elsewhere. But outside of that, I would try to keep those 3 pieces, Alvarez, Tucker, and Valdez. Valdez does have some ups and downs as far as his mentality on the mound. He's very emotional out there. From time to time, he can get rattled. We've seen him have that happen to him against the Rangers a few times. Most notably when Marcus Semien and them were in the postseason against him. But I still think he's a great starter. I think he's probably their ace for the next 3 or 4 years, and they really don't have anybody to take his spot in that rotation. You think back to when they let Verlander go, or when they let Garrett Cole go, and Verlander and so forth. They had pieces already in place to take over that role. They don't really have that right now if Valdez goes elsewhere and Verlander goes into retirement. And there's not too many starters that are going to be on the free agent market that they're going to be able to afford if they go back out there for one of those ace level pitchers in the market. So if I'm the Astros, just to kind of wrap up our argument on them, I'm not trading Tucker. I'm not trading Alvarez. This is their last real chance to compete for a World Series anyway, and there's no way I'm giving that chance away if I'm Jim Crane or Dana Brown. Rebuild is not in the Astros' vocabulary right now. Next year, we'll talk. Dylan Floro, another reliever from the Nationals, could be available. He's had some good numbers. I think he's more of a seventh inning role at best on a great postseason team, but he could be out there. Jalen Beeks. I don't think they've moved him yet. I think it was Mears they traded, but he could be a decent piece that's traded here at the deadline, probably in the fifth or sixth inning role, middle relief more than anything else. A couple of veteran relievers, Alexander McFarland from the A's, again, more middle relief. Derek Law, middle relief, etc. Paul DeJong has had a nice impact offensively this year, rebuilt his value with the White Sox. They've been showcasing him lately at third base. I wonder what team they're trying to say, hey, look at this middle infielder who can play a corner infield spot and has some power. New York Yankees. White Sox are pretty much tailoring his game to what the Yankees really need here at the deadline. I wonder if they still go that route after the acquisition of Jazz Chisholm, but could be a low-cost option here. Maybe they eat the money on a DJ LeMahieu or a Gleyber Torres, something like that, to free up some at-bats in that lineup for other pieces. But DeJong, I think, really has been showcased for one team and one team only here at the deadline, and that being the New York Yankees. Welcome in, JRP. What do you think the O's are up to? I think they're still looking at pitching. I think they're looking at both starters and relievers. I would think they're probably the hardest after Tanner Scott right now, and then they'll probably try to add one more back-end starter as well. I think bringing in Tanner Scott would really solidify their bullpen with the issues Craig Kimbrell has had. Bautista's out for the year, of course. But the O's, I think they're looking primarily at adding a closer to that bullpen. Weird the A's haven't really sold anything. Well, they don't really have much to sell, and they seem to really like the way their offense has progressed this year. The one piece they really had to sell was Brent Rooker. They had Mason Miller in that bullpen as well, but outside of that, there's no starter you're looking at going, hey, he's our Game 1 starter in the World Series, or Game 2, or Game 3, or Game 4, or Game any. They don't really have anybody that could be traded out of that rotation. Now, pieces out of that lineup, you might be able to use in a utility type of a role, but there's nobody in that lineup that you're going, hey, he's our number 3 hitter on a World Series championship team, and that's kind of where the A's are at. But appreciate you guys joining us. Been live for about an hour now. We did an hour live earlier as well today. We'll be live with you guys again tomorrow around noon, and then we'll do another one in the evening as well, updating you guys on all the latest trade rumors from around Major League Baseball. Make sure you follow us on X at UpsideSN. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to take just a few minute break here to stretch our legs and just check and see if anything else is happening on the market. And then we'll kind of do some trades with you guys, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We're going to try to do some trades for some of the contenders out there, what some pieces might be available out there, what they could ultimately be looking at now that Paredes is off the board, Eflin is off the board. Where does Crochet go? What would a package look like for Tarek Skubal? Those types of things. So make sure you stay with us. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be right back. And welcome back into the MLB Hot Stove Daily. My name is Michael. Here at the Upside Sports Network, we bring you the latest from the MLB trade deadline, the NBA, the NFL, and the NHL. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We're going to be live multiple times over the next few days, keeping you guys apprised of all the latest from the MLB trade deadline. We just got the trade, the Texas Rangers getting Carson Kelly. The return was the Arizona Fall League champion, or batting champ anyway, was Liam Hicks anyway, and then they got the return from JP Martinez that was sent to the Atlanta Braves in Tyler Owens as well. That was the return for the Tigers there. Carson Kelly was on the NL champ, the Arizona Diamondbacks last year as well. Good get overall for the Rangers. Great clubhouse guy. Returns on this seem very positive from the media. They really like this for Texas. He's a little bit better of an offensive piece this year than Kisner was as a backup. I think the Rangers will still carry 3 catchers on the big league roster. Right now their roster stands at 40, so they are fully booked. Joel Sherman does note that the Texas Rangers are talking about Michael Lorenzen. That is not a surprise at all to us here at the Upside. We've been calling that one since the day he signed that $3 million contract at the beginning of the year. I thought they needed somebody to start the year to take some innings, and he's been great for them for the first few months of the year. Struggled in his start on Saturday, really kind of saved the bullpen today, taking it upon himself. When John Gray was injured today, he immediately went to Bruce Bochy and said, hey, I only pitched 2/3 of an inning yesterday. I was not at my best. Obviously, I have something to give for this team, and I need to save this bullpen, who used both of their long men out of the bullpen yesterday, and Jose Urena and Dane Dunning. And so in an effort to save the bullpen further today, he went back out there and gave them 4 innings. Great guy, Michael Lorenzen. Love that guy as far as what he's about up here in the head, what he's got in his heart. But as far as the performance on the field, you wonder if he still has the top-end stuff of guys like a DeGrom or a Scherzer or an Eovaldi. I don't think he's anywhere near that level of pitcher, which leaves you to believe he's going to be left off of the rotation, that starting rotation. And if he's not in your rotation and his stuff doesn't play up in that bullpen, then you have to move him. You have to create a roster spot open for one of those guys that's coming back healthy. And Joel Sherman correctly points out now that rumors are starting to spill out, that teams are talking about a guy like Michael Lorenzen. So that seems to be the latest that's on the market right now. Texas making some moves. The big news, of course, of the afternoon, Isaac Paredes goes to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for Christopher Morel and 2 minor league prospects. I know we all had that one on our bingo card, right? I mean, Chicago Cubs, last place in the division, entering today, ultimately get one of the biggest bats here at the deadline and make a push here at the deadline to try to win a wild card spot and ultimately have a good third base option for the next couple of years after this year in addition to that as well. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us on X at Upside SN and Upside Sports Network on Facebook as well. Appreciate those of you who are joining us for the first time. I see we got about 25 of you guys who hung around through our brief intermission, so I appreciate you guys hanging around. Jake, welcome in. Please tell me the Braves are saying and getting something out of these soon-to-be free agents. I think what we're going to see out of Atlanta is what he's done for, 3 or 4 different trade deadlines in the past. We saw when Acuna went down last time, they added 3 or 4 outfielders to kind of take over the role of one, and they kind of mixed and matched and played them around with Rosario, Soler, Duvall, and Jock Peterson. I think we're going to see something similar here at this year's deadline. They already brought in Kelenic earlier this season. I think they still could add 1 more outfielder there. I'm not saying they add 4. I'm saying they add at least 1. A guy like Kevin Pillar, I think, would fit perfectly there. But they've been connected as well to Lane Thomas of the Nationals. I think they ultimately end up with one of those 2. My choice between them would probably be Kevin Pillar. I think he brings more of a well-rounded player at this point in their career. Lane Thomas, while he's certainly improved it as a player, I don't think he's necessarily what the Braves need right now. And I think Pillar would be just what the doctor ordered, at least to kind of help out that underperforming Braves lineup. But appreciate those of you who have joined us. Let's kind of finish out our discussion here over the top 50 and kind of go on to some trades here. Gio Urshela, available from the Tigers. Obviously a kind of utility player. Not a great year, but a cheap 1-year deal. So teams that are up against it from a salary perspective that have injury, i.e. the Braves at second base. Maybe this is the Ozzie Albies replacement here. Miguel Andujar has played pretty well this year compared to his Past performances, and he's finally starting to live up to a small portion of his prospect status. Sorry, Yankees fans, I still don't believe that you guys were vying him as one of the greatest prospects your team has ever had. He may have been viewed that way in your eyes, but he never was viewed that way outside of that New York bubble. And I think we realize what the type of player he can be is still a productive major league player, just a matter of how you use him. I'm not saying he's a superstar, but I am saying there's a role for him on a playoff team. Will the A's move him? They very well could. He doesn't really fit the timeline of the A's for their next team in contention. Bell has already been waived by the Marlins. I think he's going to be traded here if a team is willing to take on the money. I don't think there will be, though, and so I think he ultimately either passes all the way through waivers or goes on to free agency. So we shall see. That price tag, though, on Bell is pretty high unless the Marlins are willing to eat some of it. Adam has already been moved by the Rays. Ward is a nice piece that's available from the Angels. Braves are also talking to them about Taylor Ward. Tyler Anderson, one of the better starters that's left on this year's market, would be a nice fit. Teams that need some starting pitching, the Cardinals would be a great fit. Orioles would be another one. The Mariners already have some great starters there, but the Angels have a plethora of players on their roster that could fill some holes there in Seattle. And they've shown a willingness to trade within the division. Jerry Dipoto is always willing to trade with just about anybody. Luis Rengifo fits in there. Ward fits, obviously. Pilar. They need to get some consistent major league at-bats out of some of their holes in their lineup, especially with J.P. Crawford going down. Ty France no longer on the roster. Julio Rodriguez out. They brought in Randy Rosarena, but the Mariners would be a nice bet to add some talent here to their lineup over the next couple of days. Griffin Canning, another starter for the Angels. I don't think there's really a trade here for the Angels for Griffin Canning. I think he really stays put. Miller, I think if he had not injured his hand, I think the chances of a trade for him probably would have sat around 10%. Right now, with the injury, the only teams that are really going to be in there are the teams that need a true ace reliever. Teams that believe they're already a perfect team that just might need one more piece in case of injury, one more dominant reliever who can come in and really slam the door shut, who can take over that ninth inning role if they have somebody falter. Teams that fit this would be the teams like the Baltimore Orioles, Philadelphia Phillies, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Outside of that, I don't think any of the other teams are really going to look at Mason Miller, especially considering the injury now. Lucas Erceg, I think he'd be a great fit as a 7th, 8th inning guy, really untested in a postseason setting, obviously, much like all the other A's on the roster. But he'd be a nice get for a team, probably as more of a 6th, 7th inning guy in a postseason bullpen rather than an 8th inning setup guy or even a closer. Where he's currently being cast at in Oakland is that 8th inning role. He's excelled at it. 29 years old, not going to be around for that next contending team for the A's. Blue Jays, getting on to Vlad Guerrero Jr. I think before the season, if you had told the Blue Jays that you're where you were at in the standings, 15 games out of first in your division, that you're going to be in stellar position, they would have told you we'll consider trades for Vlad Guerrero Jr. Now, if you look at the same front office group, I think they realize the writing is on the wall that if they don't get a winning team on the field next year, they could be on the way out the door. And so Toronto, I think, is going to act more as a brief seller here at the deadline, free up some money on some of those starting pitchers like Chris Bassett they might move off of. They got some calls on Kevin Gausman as well. I was a proponent of them possibly trading Jose Barrios, who pitched very well today. But getting off of some of the money and then investing in free agency this offseason might be the one way they can try to reverse this thing on the fly. And maybe a better year from Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. next year. And this team is right back into contention in the AL East. And maybe once again for a World Series. I think that's a little bit pie in the sky, if you will, for them. But, you know, they're the team. They're the front office executives that are trying to save their own job as well. You never want to see somebody fired and so forth. You want to always root for the best in people. But when you're not performing in your job, when you're a fan of the team, you want to make sure you're doing what's in the best interest of your team. And so maybe trading Vlad Guerrero Jr. would be the best overall decision. Maybe capitalizing on Bo Bichette now if he was performing better would be the best decision. But at the very least, it looks like those guys are at least going into the offseason as members of the team. Let's finish out this top 50 here. Tarek Skubal, probably the biggest starting pitcher that could be traded here at the deadline. Skubal probably going to win the AL Cy Young in my estimation. Significant value here. I think even if you got the number one prospect in the sport would not be enough for Tarek Skubal right now. That's how good he has been. A team like the Orioles and Dodgers are the only teams I would expect to even have the pieces or the willingness to take him on. Orioles really need a piece like this because they're not going to spend in free agency. Skubal signed for a few more years. They have Eflin for one more year as well. This would give them some big-time insurance if they are unable to retain Burns as well. Honestly, I think Burns is going to go to the market, and I think there's a very good chance he ultimately leaves for greener pastures. And so Skubal, I think, would be a great fit there. So do I think they'll trade Jackson Holliday? I do not, but I do think it would cost a significant price if he is traded. Now, as far as the percentage chance he gets moved, I would put this one at less than 1%. I think it's very unrealistic that they move him. Tigers, I would think their front office views themselves as a year or so away. They're starting to get some positive returns on some of their younger players this year. Skubal's been a really good starting pitcher. And if they get some more better performances out of that rotation, and if they get Javi Baez to just play a little bit better on that massive contract he signed and not be just a dead weight in the middle of that lineup, then I think they could get the ball rolling and at least be a wild card contender next year. Do I think that's realistic? Probably not. But as far as Skubal goes, I think the chances of him moving, extremely slim. So that's their top 50. Other names to watch anyway. We've mentioned quite a few of these. Jameson Taillon, we've already mentioned. Nico Horner, I don't think he's going anywhere after the trade for Paredes. Morel has already been moved. Neris, I think, could be a name that's traded here as the Cubs try to retool their bullpen a little bit. Mets have seemed to like the cast-offs from the Houston Astros. They brought in Phil Maton. They just brought in Ryan Stanek. Hey, why not bring back another one in Hector Neris while another name would go into that bullpen as well for the Cubs? There's so many relievers that are out there. They could easily jostle him around if somebody wanted to bring him in. D-backs are not trading Christian Walker, Sewald. They're not trading Peterson. They're not. They could trade Grichuk. They got some great performance anyway out of McCarthy the other day. Went 5 for 5. First time in franchise history, I believe that was done. Baez is a negative 1.5 WAR. I'm surprised that's only as low as it is. I mean, I thought he was closer to a 3 at this point. He's been that bad. Giants, we mentioned last night, might have a suitor for Michael Conforto, that being the New York Mets. The Rogers brothers could find a home. Mike Yastrzemski's been connected to a team like the Texas Rangers as well. Pirates have a bunch of guys that are on one-year deals. Chapman, Perez, Taylor, Grandal, and Joe. But they're looking for some offense. So if they're going to make some moves, maybe they spin off Martin Perez, teams that need some starting pitching. Chapman's basically seen the best part of his career go bye-bye now. And maybe they want to bring in a guy like Isaac Paredes. I think would have been a great fit, but I just don't think they're going to give up the prospect capital needed to bring in the pieces that they're looking for. So I think the best case scenario for them, realize they're not winning the division, realize they got a great 1-2-3 in that rotation, realize that they got a good deal in Michael Taylor in the outfield, but they need to still add to that lineup. They need one more innings eater as well, and then they're good to go. For the Rangers, they're not selling. I don't think Heaney's going anywhere. They really like his stuff in a postseason series. Guys that are more likely to be moved are guys they don't really view as great stuff guys in a postseason series. Guys like Michael Lorenzen, guys like Dane Dunning. I think those are the more likely names to get moved if they're going to move some starters. Robertson and Yates aren't going anywhere. Gray could have been moved, but he had the injury today. He's going nowhere. Leclerc's really rebounded. He's going nowhere. And Urena, I think, really fits well on this team as a spot starter, multi-inning reliever. He's found a home, I believe, in Texas. I don't think he's going anywhere either. Montas is said to be available from the Reds. I think there would be a decent market for him as a starter. Martinez, too rich. I don't think he goes anywhere. India, there's been some rumblings about the Dodgers' connection there. I don't think that happens, though. But ultimately, I think some of the late-inning relievers for them could move as well. Then, of course, you get into their injured list guys and so forth. Renjifo's back and so forth. But those are the names that we could see moved. We already saw Yimi Garcia moved, and I think that's basically it. We might see a salary dump a little bit out there in Arizona with Jordan Montgomery. But those are your top 50 according to MLB Trade Rumors. Now, let's start making some trades, shall we? Let me get the screen pulled up for you guys. We'll go over to the trade boards and just see what's happening out there. What are you guys proposing? Royals getting a good bullpen arm in Strickland, probably a replacement for Hunter Harvey. A good outfielder, which is what they really need. I like this trade. I think the value is way off. but this is a good deal overall. I think the Royals are looking for a corner outfield bat. I do like uh, the addition of a reliever with Hunter Harvey going on the injured list. I don't know if you commented on this, but what do you think about Skobal rumors? I would put them, like I just mentioned a minute ago, I'd put them at less than a 1% chance that Skobal goes anywhere. I think his market for where teams value him is still really high, don't get me wrong. But I think the Tigers view themselves as a year away, and Skobal is a key piece, the ace of their staff once they get there. And they would have to be bowled over by an offer and then some. So what that means is a guy like Jackson Holliday and Kristen Herstad and a couple of other pieces from the Orioles might be the trade that ultimately gets it done if they're willing to do so. I don't think the Orioles would be willing to include Jackson Holliday, and I think that's where the discussion dies. For the Dodgers, they have a number of good prospects that they could include in a deal here to the White Sox, or to the Tigers anyway, but I don't think there's any deal there as well. Losing Cross and Kurtznow, those two would kill me. I would agree there. Like I just said with this trade for the Royals, I think this trade is a little rich. I think you could probably get it done with maybe Cross as the centerpiece and then like a couple of A-ball players or like Summer League, or what is it, Winter Ball players, Dominican Summer League, whatever they call it, the DSL. Another trade here, Mets getting rid of DJ Stewart. They need to really free up that roster spot. Getting rid of Beatty as the ballast, bringing in Assad. I don't really like that for either team. Astros adding Tyler Anderson in exchange for a couple of decent prospects. This would be a nice get for them. Adds a starting pitcher, especially with the concerns about Verlander coming back. He's got 1 year left to control after this one, I believe. And really, I think would stabilize a rotation that's really suffered from injuries this year. It's a trade within the division, so the price might be a little richer than, say, another team out there. You always hate to trade within your division and then have those players kill you. But looking at the way the league is set up right now, you don't play each other 19 or 18 times anymore. It's 13 games, so you're not going to play each other as often. And honestly, you still want to take the best package available. And if this is the best package they get for Anderson, so be it. But I do think Anderson's probably worth a little bit more than that. But not a bad trade overall. 3 decent pieces going to the Mets, all pitchers, Chafin, Flaherty, and Lang. For Beatty and Ruddick, don't see that happening at all. Reason being because I don't think they have that many holes in their bullpen or roster spots available to take all 3 of them. Royals get Rengifo and Ward. Again, they need some bats. They need somebody to kind of stabilize things. I just don't think they're willing to give up that many prospects for Luis Rengifo and Taylor Ward. I just don't see it. What's team, in your opinion, made the best trade so far, if any? Best trade. Well, if we're counting the earlier trades during the season of Luis Ariz and Dylan Cease, by far the San Diego Padres, and it's not close. Like, they've lapped the entire field. That's how good A.J. Preller was in getting both of those pieces. Home run trades, both of them. Dylan Cease even more so. As far as outside of those moves, who made the best trade within the last week or so? Cubs getting Paredes has got to be up there, especially when you consider what they gave up. Morel, who really didn't have a home on this roster, as far as a home on the field. They gave up a reliever who's probably going to step in there into a big league role and probably pitch in the 6th, 7th inning here to start, and then probably ends up as an 8th inning setup guy like Adam. Not a big price to pay so far, and then you give up one decent pitching prospect in Johnson. That's a great trade for the Chicago Cubs. It solidifies a platoon position for them. Anytime I hear the word platoon on your team, that means to me that you don't have one solution at that position, that you don't have one guy at that job. You hear how teams in football say they have, we don't have one quarterback. We have 3 quarterbacks who could start for us. We don't have a starter. We have 3 of them. That just means you don't have the guy. And so right now, before this trade, the Cubs didn't have the third baseman. Now they do in Paredes. He immediately steps in and creates a great kind of a stalwart position for them going forward. And cost control, cost certainty. Gotta love that if you're ownership there as well. So, best trade, position player, Isaac Paredes. I like the trade that the Mariners made to bring in a Rosarania. Remains to be seen what the player to be named later is, but the Rays, I think, did really well there. I think it was a fairly even trade. The trade for Adam going to the Padres, I think, was a little rich if I'm the Padres, but ultimately, the guy, one of the top 15 guys that you gave up, Lesko, former first round pick anyway, had Tommy John, had given up 74 walks so far this year and really hadn't solidified himself. But every single time you see a guy go from another team that's where he's struggling and immediately goes to the Rays and they solve his issue and he takes off like a rocket and he really performs. They've really only failed with one other prospect like that, and that being Luis Patino, also from the San Diego Padres. So maybe the Padres think that lightning will strike twice and it won't burn them in the long run. So we'll see. Dodgers, I don't think they would do any trade like this. Rengifo, Moniak, and Joyce, all good pieces, but they're looking for stars. They aren't looking for minor pieces to kind of tinker with the edges of this roster. Braves get Verdugo. Yankees are looking to offload him a little bit, it seems like. Darno going back the other way, though. I don't think that is a prayer. Darno is staying with the Braves. Rooker, we just talked about him. I don't think he goes anywhere. Fairbanks to the Yankees. They're one of the rumors that I was looking at just before I came back on after our brief intermission, is that the Yankees are looking for a back-end reliever, according to Joel Sherman and John Heyman. They want somebody who can take over a late inning, 8th or 9th inning role. Fairbanks could be one of those players, and they are not shy at all about trading within the division. The Rays are anyway. They just want the best pieces that they can get, and taking them away from a division rival, even better, even sweeter if you're the Tampa Bay Rays. And so getting a guy like Clayton Beeter, Chase Hampton, Lalane, that price would be steep, but I'm still not sure even that would get it done. Fairbanks, I think, has some decent value. I think his value is a little bit all over the place depending on who you ask. Injuries drag it down. High performance brings it back up. Length of the contract brings it back up. And then the value of the contract, the money, brings it back down. He's kind of all over the place. I've heard some teams are completely out on him because of the injury. I've heard other teams are in on him because of the contract and the high performance. But remains to be seen, if the Rays are able to make a trade for him and what kind of return he would get. Paredes trade here for the Rays, with the Yankees anyway, what it would have looked like. I don't think that would have gotten it done, and I don't think Dominguez would have been part of the trade for Paredes either. That would have been about the trade here. I think that the Dodgers would have made for Paredes Sheehan, Rushing, and Freeland. I think that would have been the trade, and he would have been an impact piece for the Dodgers. That would have been a great trade for them. Bullpen arm, Dylan Floro goes to the Cardinals in exchange for Carlson and Graceffo. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but overall, don't hate the trade, but Carlson does nothing for the Nationals. I'm not sure that trade does enough for both teams to even consider doing it. So I would say no on both sides. Cubs are no longer going to trade Ian Happ. I thought he might have been a nice option out there on the trade market, but I don't think he's going anywhere. And Luis Garcia, Taylor Ward to the Royals. Nice stack there, much like the Hunter Strickland trade we saw at the top. And this is a little bit more of a good trade here. Cross is your name, and then a couple of lower level prospects as well to kind of round out the package. Taylor Ward playing really bad right now. Well, I mean, not all Angels are doing great, and even when you're performing bad on some of these sellers, because you have a track record of success, some teams might be willing to look at you as a platoon outfielder for a playoff team. Will Mason Miller be available? I think he is available. To what extent, though? I don't think he was necessarily being, hey, we'll take a bag of beans for Mason Miller. I don't think there was ever anything like that they were going to, sell him on the cheap. He's got some of the best swing and miss stuff this year. Made a little bit of a bonehead decision by punching a table and breaking his hand. But kind of the errors of youth. He struggles to stay healthy. Just the latest example of it is this one. The control of that reliever is what is most attractive to teams. That and the swing and miss stuff. Swing and miss is really what gets you going in the postseason. I mentioned how Dane Dunning and Michael Lorenzen are more available than guys like Andrew Heaney from the Texas Rangers because Andrew Heaney has greater stuff. They like those stuff type pitchers in a shorter sample size in a postseason series rather than guys who are innings eaters, guys who are 93 to 95, not a lot of movement, those kinds of things. So Mason Miller, great contract, lots of control. Availability is a little bit of a question mark, but it's going to be a significant price. In case you guys are wondering what his cost could be, we're probably talking about at least one top 100 prospect and maybe a borderline top 100 really get this deal done. But we've seen, as I mentioned off the top, prices are a little bit depressed right now in the market. So maybe a team takes advantage of the fact that he did punch a table, that the A's are desperate for some starting pitching prospects, and maybe they just try to get something done there. Orioles, Dodgers, I think the Rangers have at least kicked the tires on him as well. Mets have at least reached out. Pretty much any team that's a contender has at least reached out about Mason Miller. MLB Trade Rumors said that the Yankees are interested in Tommy Edman. That was an article from earlier today. Kind of goes in that same vein as the Paul DeJong stuff we were talking about earlier. I believe they're in the market still for a corner infielder, first base, third base, somebody who can give them a little bit better performance than what they've gotten out of LeMahieu, Torres, etc. this year. They need some at least major league quality at bats. They don't necessarily need another Judge or a Soto. They need somebody to come in there and not hit below 200 to be able to get on base and at least perform at a major league caliber. They need major league level or better players, and right now they don't even have replacement level players, and that's why they're struggling over the last month or so. Pretty close to the same record as the Chicago White Sox over the last 30 plus days. We shall see who the Yankees bring in into that lineup, but it looks like they're looking still at multiple avenues, both in the bullpen, in that lineup, and possibly as a back-end starter as well. They're also in on Garrett Crochet, just to kind of keep that one in front of everybody's mind, that it's not just the O's, it's not just the Dodgers. The Yankees are said to be in there as well. I hear everyone saying the O's should go all in. Do you agree that they should go all in for a chance at a World Series? All in, no, but I do think they need to go all in for a controllable starting pitcher. Corbin Burnes is signed for this year and this year only. Do I think they need to go all in to win the World Series this year, bring them in, hell or high water, give up the farm system, mortgage the future to be able to win the World Series this year? I do not. I think they can still have their cake and eat it too. I think they can hold on to Holiday. I think they can still try to trade guys like Kowser, Hurstead, other top-end prospects to try to bring in a top-end starting pitcher like Skobal or somebody else out there that we're not seeing. Maybe they take advantage of a guy like Blake Snell possibly being available and say, hey, we can afford the contract on a short-term deal for the $30 million next year. We couldn't afford a $30 million a year contract for 6 years, which is what Corbin Burnes is probably going to make after this year, which is why I think he probably goes elsewhere after the season. They need another ace, another number one in that rotation, and they need somebody controllable. They can't go out there and get another Jack Flaherty, in my estimation, because that just repeats the same problem. They lose the assets, they don't retain the starting pitcher, and it's not going to be enough to move the needle. Now, if the Texas Rangers had decided to be a seller at the deadline, I think Eovaldi would have been a perfect starting pitcher for them. Max Scherzer would have been a little bit less so because I think he struggles in that ballpark to some degree. We've seen that with the times he's faced the Orioles so far this year. But as far as what they need, they absolutely need a controllable starter. Skobal would be at the top of my list. Garrett Crochet if Skobal does not get moved. But they need somebody controllable. That way they're not desperate and overpaying after the season to bring in a starting pitcher, whether it be in free agency or via trade. So to answer your question, do I think they go all in, hell or high water, give up the farm to try to win the World Series this year? No, but I don't think they have to either. I think they're the reason why they are where they are right now. I love the way Ron Darling put this. And I think it was Buck Showalter as well. You can't lose your identity. What have they done? They've drafted and developed that talent. They've worked really well with their position player talent. Their starting pitcher talent hasn't come along at the same rate. They're still decent options, but none of them have really developed into a number one like they had hoped. Grayson Rodriguez holds out the best hope still, but I don't think anybody still views him as an ace. But especially after we've seen him get rocked multiple times by the Rangers in the postseason and in the regular season this year. Seems to struggle with lineups like the Rangers, even though the Rangers are a poor offensive team this year. He seems to struggle with that type of constructed lineup. but they need some starting pitching. They need a controllable starter. Garrett Crochet, I think, is probably the best and easiest one for them to get. Tarek Skubal, probably the best option, best starter that could be available, unless there's some surprises that we see out there. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. If there's another big trade that happens tonight, we'll go ahead and break in live for you guys. Make sure you guys hit a like and subscribe on this video. And notice we gained a few subscribers since we started, so thank you guys for hanging around. 30 strong, pretty much the entire length of this video. We'll be live again with you guys tomorrow around noon. Give you guys an update as to what's happening on the market if nothing happens this evening. And then again, we'll be live with you guys in the evening, update you guys on all the trade rumors. And then on trade deadline day, we will be live for you guys pretty much from around 9 a.m. through the deadline. So it'll be 9 hours of nonstop live coverage here at the Upside Sports Network. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN to be notified when we do go live. That way you guys can join us. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. You guys have a great evening, and hopefully we see some crazy trades. Gosh, I know I'm looking for it. Y'all have a great one.